They held the medicine out to her with shaking hands. The bitter liquid caught the firelight, dark and thick, the kind that had saved lives for generations. Children had swallowed it screaming. Elders had begged for it on their knees. Even the strongest men never refused it when death came this close. But she did. The woman sat on the dirt floor, her back straight, her breath shallow, sweat glistening on her skin. Her body was clearly failing, everyone could see it. Every breath looked like it might be her last. The healer whispered urgently. The villagers crowded closer. Someone cried her name. Still, she shook her head. Not in fear. Not in confusion. Not in pride. In certainty. Her lips remained sealed, even as her hands trembled. Even as her knees buckled. Even as the medicine hovered inches from her mouth, close enough that the smell filled her lungs. Just one sip, someone begged. She closed her eyes. Outside, the village fell silent. No birds. No wind. No footsteps. It was as if the world itself was waiting for her answer. Then she did something that froze everyone in place. She pushed the medicine away. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Gently. As if refusing it was the most natural thing in the world. And in that moment, as her body weakened and panic spread through the crowd, a terrifying question took hold of every mind watching her fade. What could possibly be worth more than her own life? By morning, the village returned to its rhythm. Smoke curled gently from cooking fires, rising in thin blue lines that drifted lazily into the pale sky. Women knelt on packed earth, grinding grain with slow, familiar motions. Children ran barefoot between huts, their laughter bouncing off mud walls and woven fences. A rooster crowed somewhere near the river, late as always, as if time itself moved more softly here. Life continued because it always had. In this village, sickness was not mysterious. It was expected, respected, and treated with care. When a body weakened, the community responded together. The healer prepared roots and leaves passed down through generations. Elders murmured old assurances. Neighbors brought food, water, warm cloths. No one faced illness alone. Medicine here was not just liquid in a gourd. It was trust, memory, survival. People spoke often of the cures that had saved them. The old man with the crooked leg who should have died as a boy. The young mother who survived childbirth against all odds. Even the children knew the taste of bitterness meant life. That was why what had happened the night before sat so heavily in everyone's chest. No one spoke about it openly at first. They swept their yards. They mended nets. They measured grain and counted chickens. But every pair of eyes drifted, again and again, toward the small hut near the edge of the village, the one with the door still closed long after sunrise. She lived there alone. Not because she was shunned. Because she preferred it that way. The woman had always been quiet, but never distant. She greeted others with a soft nod, a faint smile. She helped when help was needed, especially with children and the elderly. When someone dropped a basket, she was already bending to gather the pieces. When someone was grieving, she sat beside them without speaking, staying longer than anyone else. She never rushed. She never complained. And until recently, she had never been sick. The healer passed her hut that morning and slowed his steps. He carried his bag, heavy with dried herbs and small bottles, the same bag that had never failed him. He paused, listening. Nothing. No coughing. No movement. Just silence. Nearby, two women whispered as they worked. "She should have taken it," one murmured, keeping her voice low. "No one survives that fever without medicine," the other replied. Yet even as they spoke, their voices carried no anger. Only confusion. A kind of unease that had no name yet. Children were told to stay away from the hut. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Something serious had happened, and even they could feel it. Their games shifted farther down the path, their laughter softer than usual. As the sun climbed higher, the village looked the same as it always had. The colors were familiar. The sounds were comforting. The routines held firm. But beneath it all, something felt misaligned. It wasn't just that the woman was ill. People had been ill before. It was the way she had refused help so calmly. The way she had not argued or explained. The way her eyes had held no panic, only resolve. That did not belong in a place where survival was shared. By midday, curiosity had replaced shock. Why would someone who had always accepted the village accept nothing now? Why would someone so gentle choose suffering in silence? And as the hut remained closed, and the healer's bag stayed untouched, a quiet, unsettling thought began to move through the village like a shadow in the sun. Whatever was happening with her did not begin with the illness. It had begun long before. They began to speak about her the way people speak about the rain, carefully, indirectly, as if saying too much might change its course. Her name was known to everyone, yet rarely spoken aloud. When it was, voices softened. Not out of fear, but instinct. She had a way of making people lower their tone, as though something sacred hovered around her without ever announcing itself. No one could remember when she first arrived in the village. She had simply been there. Some said she came after a long drought, walking in from the eastern road with nothing but a small bundle tied in cloth. Others believed she had been born nearby and returned after many years away. The stories never matched, and she never corrected them. When asked about her past, she smiled faintly and redirected the conversation. Asked where her family was, she would say only, "They are safe," and nothing more. That was the first thing people noticed about her. She never lied, but she never explained. She lived simply. Her hut held only what was needed: a mat, a pot, a small wooden bowl worn smooth by years of use. No charms hung from her door. No decorations marked her walls. Yet the space felt intentional, as if everything unnecessary had been gently removed. Children liked her, not because she entertained them, but because she listened. When they spoke, she gave them her full attention, eyes steady, head tilted slightly forward, as if every word mattered. When they scraped knees or bruised pride, she cleaned wounds quietly and sent them back with a soft touch to the shoulder. She never scolded. The elders respected her. She greeted them first, always. She carried water for those who could no longer lift heavy pots. She sat with them in the evenings, listening to stories she had clearly heard before, never interrupting, never correcting. She seemed content being invisible. Until the illness. At first, no one noticed. She still walked the paths at dawn. Still fetched water. Still shared what little she had. But she moved more slowly. She paused more often. Her hands sometimes trembled when she thought no one was looking. When the healer finally approached her, she did not refuse him. She thanked him. She listened. She allowed him to examine her, to feel her forehead, to check her breathing. She nodded as he spoke, acknowledging every word. Then, calmly, she said no. Not yet. The healer had frowned. Confused but patient. Later, then, he had offered. She met his eyes and shook her head. Not at all. That was when unease crept in. Because she did not sound stubborn. She sounded certain. As her condition worsened, people tried different approaches. Some appealed to logic. Some to faith. Some to memory. "You've seen what this medicine can do," one woman pleaded. She nodded. "I have." "You've helped prepare it yourself," another said. "Yes." "So why?" She lowered her gaze. "I cannot." That was all. No drama. No tears. No anger. Just a boundary she would not cross. At night, a few villagers swore they saw a light inside her hut long after she should have been asleep. Not firelight, something dimmer, steadier. Others said they heard her whispering, not in prayer, but in conversation. As if someone else were there. When questioned, she only smiled and said she was resting. Her fever climbed. Her strength faded. Yet her resolve did not. And that was what frightened them most. Because whatever she was refusing the medicine for, it was not ignorance. It was not fear. It was a choice. And choices like that always have a reason, one heavy enough to outweigh life itself. As the days passed, the village began to listen more closely, to each other, and to the spaces between words. It started with small things. An elder remembered seeing the woman years ago, standing at the edge of the river long after sunset, her feet in the water, her hands clasped tightly at her chest as if holding something invisible. Another recalled how she never crossed the old stone marker near the northern fields, no matter how much time it saved. A child mentioned, without understanding its weight, that the woman sometimes counted under her breath when she thought no one was near. None of these memories meant anything on their own. Together, they formed a pattern that refused to settle. The healer returned to her hut every morning. Each time, he brought fresh medicine, prepared with care and urgency. Each time, she thanked him. Each time, she refused. Her body, however, was no longer pretending to be strong. She struggled to sit upright. Her voice had grown softer, thinner, like it had to travel a longer distance to be heard. When she walked, it was with measured steps, as though she were conserving something precious. Still, there was no fear in her eyes. That was the detail no one could explain. When most people grew this ill, they begged, or raged, or wept. They clung to hope with both hands. She did none of those things. She watched the world around her with an intensity that felt almost protective, like someone guarding a fragile flame from the wind. One afternoon, a woman from the village pressed her gently. "What happens if you take the medicine?" she asked, careful not to sound accusing. The sick woman was silent for a long moment, long enough that the question itself began to feel dangerous. Then she said, "Someone else will suffer." The words landed softly, but their weight was enormous. "Who?" the woman whispered. The sick woman shook her head. "That is not for me to say." That single sentence ignited everything. Speculation spread like fire through dry grass. Some believed she was cursed. Others thought she carried a sickness meant for someone else, a burden she had taken willingly. A few wondered if she had made a vow, to the spirits, to the land, to something unseen and ancient. At night, the whispers grew louder. People spoke of old stories, rarely told aloud. Stories of women who carried pain so others would not. Of bargains made in silence. Of lives quietly exchanged, not by force, but by love. Still, no one confronted her directly. There was something about the way she suffered that demanded respect. One evening, as the sun bled red into the horizon, the healer stayed longer than usual. He watched her struggle to breathe, watched her fingers dig into the mat beneath her, watched sweat pool at her temples. "This will kill you," he said at last, his voice breaking. She looked at him, really looked at him, as if memorizing his face. "I know," she replied. The healer swallowed hard. "Then why endure it?" Her eyes filled, not with tears, but with something older. Something heavier. "Because if I don't," she said slowly, "it will not be me who pays the price." The healer felt a chill run through him. "Who will?" he asked. She turned her face toward the door, toward the village beyond it, toward lives unfolding in ordinary ways. And she said nothing. That night, a storm passed without rain. The air pressed down heavy and still. Dogs whimpered. Children woke from uneasy sleep. In her hut, the woman sat awake, whispering words no one could hear, counting again under her breath, over and over, as if measuring time not by hours, but by how long she could hold the pain. And the village began to understand something terrifying. Her illness was not an accident. It was a line she had chosen to stand on, between herself and something far worse. By the 5th day, worry was no longer quiet. It walked openly through the village, sitting in doorways, hovering over cooking fires, tightening around every conversation. The woman's refusal had moved beyond confusion. It was now something people felt in their bones, heavy, unavoidable, demanding to be answered. Her strength was nearly gone. She no longer fetched water. She no longer walked the paths at dawn. 2 women took turns bringing her thin broth, though most of it went untouched. When she spoke, her voice cracked, like dry earth splitting under the sun. And still, every morning, the healer arrived with medicine. And still, she refused. Some villagers began to lose patience. "This is no longer bravery," a man muttered near the well. "It's foolishness." Another answered sharply, "You didn't see her eyes. She knows something." Arguments flared and died quickly, but the division remained. For the first time, her quiet presence, once a comfort, had become a source of tension. That afternoon, the elders called a gathering. They sat beneath the old tree at the center of the village, the one where disputes were settled and decisions made. The healer stood among them, his bag at his feet, unopened. Faces were tight. No one smiled. "She cannot be allowed to die like this," one elder said. "Not when the cure is here." "But she refuses," another replied. "We cannot force medicine down her throat." A third elder leaned forward. "We can demand an explanation." The word demand hung in the air, sharp and unfamiliar. As if summoned by the weight of it, the woman appeared. She had walked there alone. Every step looked painful. Her breathing was uneven. Yet she stood before them with her head high, hands folded calmly in front of her, as if she were not the one being discussed. "You called for me," she said. No one answered at first. Finally, the oldest elder spoke. "Why do you refuse what will save you?" The woman met his gaze. Her eyes were sunken, but steady. "Because it will cost more than my life," she said. A murmur rippled through the gathered crowd. "What cost?" someone demanded. She inhaled slowly. "A life that is not mine to give." The elders exchanged glances. "Words are not enough," the healer said softly. "We are watching you die." She nodded. "I know." "Then you leave us no choice," another elder said. "We cannot sit and watch this." For the first time, something flickered across her face. Fear, not for herself. "Please," she whispered, "do not do what you are thinking." That was all it took. Silence crashed down like thunder. Because until that moment, no one had considered that helping her might cause harm. The healer knelt in front of her, lowering his voice. "If you take the medicine," he said carefully, "what happens?" Her lips trembled. She hesitated, just for a breath. Then she shook her head, harder than before. "I cannot say. But I cannot let it happen." The crowd watched her sway, watched her knees buckle slightly before she caught herself. The medicine sat beside the healer, full and waiting. This was the moment. Everyone felt it. If she took the medicine now, she would live. If she did not, she would likely die. Her hands clenched. Tears slipped down her cheeks, not from pain, but from the weight of the choice. "I am sorry," she whispered. "This is mine to carry." She stepped back, away from the medicine, away from safety, away from life. And in that instant, a terrible truth settled over the village. She was not enduring this because she had to. She was enduring it because she believed, without doubt, that her suffering was holding something else at bay. Something she loved. Something she would not name. Something she was willing to die for. That night, the village did not sleep. Oil lamps burned low in doorways long past midnight. Mothers held their children closer than usual. Even the elders, who had seen more death than most could imagine, lay awake listening to the fragile sounds of breathing drifting from the hut at the edge of the path. The woman's breathing had changed. It came in shallow pulls now, uneven and strained, like each breath had to be chosen. Two women sat inside her hut, wiping her forehead, whispering reassurance she could barely hear. The healer knelt nearby, his hands trembling as he checked her pulse again and again, as if hoping it might suddenly change its mind. "This is the last night," he whispered to the elders outside. "If nothing is done, she will not see the morning." The word spread quietly, but quickly. By the time the moon reached its highest point, nearly the entire village had gathered nearby, not to watch, but to wait. No one spoke above a murmur. No one cried openly. It felt like standing beside a river, knowing something precious was about to be carried away. Inside the hut, the woman stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first. Then they found the healer. "You're still here," she said faintly. He swallowed hard. "I will not leave you." She managed the smallest smile. "You always keep your word." He reached for the medicine, his hands shaking so badly the liquid rippled inside the vessel. "Please," he said, "whatever you believe will happen, whatever price you think will be paid, we will face it together." For the first time, her resolve cracked. Tears spilled freely now. Her body trembled, not from fever alone, but from exhaustion. From holding back something too heavy for one person to carry. "I want to live," she whispered. The words sliced through the air. Outside, someone sobbed. "I am so tired," she continued. "I want the pain to stop. I want to wake up and feel the sun again." The healer moved closer, lifting the medicine. "Then take it," he said gently. Her hands rose, weak and shaking. For a moment, just a moment, she reached toward it. Time seemed to stretch thin. Her fingers brushed the edge of the cup. And then she froze. A sharp breath caught in her throat. Her eyes widened, filling with sudden terror, not of death, but of something else. Something she could see and no one else could. "No," she gasped, pulling her hand back. "I can't." "Why?" the healer pleaded. "Tell us." Her voice broke completely. "Because if I do, it won't be me who dies." Silence swallowed the hut. "What do you mean?" one of the women asked. The sick woman turned her face toward the wall, as if ashamed. "He's still too small," she whispered. The words made no sense. Too small for what? The healer stared at her. "Who?" he asked. She squeezed her eyes shut. "Please," she said, barely audible. "I don't have much time left. Let me finish this." "Finish what?" the healer demanded, desperation creeping into his voice. She did not answer. Instead, she began counting again under her breath. 1, 2, 3. Each number felt like a step closer to something unseen. Her body convulsed as a wave of pain tore through her. The healer grabbed her shoulders, trying to steady her, trying to anchor her to the world. "This isn't right," he said hoarsely. "No life should be paid for like this." She opened her eyes one last time and looked at him with a depth of sorrow and love that stole his breath. "Some lives are," she whispered, "so others don't have to be." Her eyes closed. Outside, the night held its breath. And everyone felt it then, the terrible certainty that the next dawn would not bring relief. Only the truth. Just before dawn, a cry cut through the stillness. It did not come from the woman's hut. It came from across the village. A child's cry. Sharp. Desperate. No. People bolted upright from their mats. Mothers rushed outside. Elders stumbled toward the sound, hearts pounding with a fear they could not yet name. The sky was still dark, the horizon barely pale, as if the day itself was unsure whether to arrive. The cry came again, louder this time. From the hut of the young mother near the eastern path. "She was not due yet," someone whispered. The healer froze. A terrible understanding began to form in his chest. He turned slowly, looking back toward the woman's hut, the one where death waited in silence. Then he ran. Inside, the woman lay motionless, her breathing faint but present. Her lips were dry. Her face was drawn, but peaceful, as though she had crossed some unseen threshold and was now holding her ground on the other side. She was still alive. Barely. The healer pressed his fingers to her neck. A pulse, weak, but there. He looked at her hands. They were unclenched now. The counting had stopped. Outside, the cries grew frantic. Women shouted for help. Someone called the healer's name, panic tearing through their voice. He stood there, torn between two lives. Then the truth hit him with brutal clarity. The young mother across the village had lost 2 children before birth. Each time, the same strange illness. Each time, the same unexplained failure of the body to carry life to term. The village had whispered about curses, about fate. And each time, the woman had arrived not long before the loss. He looked at her again, at the fragile rise and fall of her chest. "He's still too small." The words echoed in his mind. The healer's hands began to shake. He left the hut. At the birthing hut, chaos reigned. The young mother screamed in pain, her body racked with contractions that came too soon, too violently. Blood stained the mats. Fear filled every corner of the room. "This isn't right," an elder said. "The child won't survive." The healer closed his eyes. Then he spoke. "Wait." They stared at him. "There is something we must understand first," he said slowly. "Something we were never meant to see this way." Back at the woman's hut, her breathing faltered. A long pause. Then another shallow breath. As the sky lightened, the cries of labor shifted, from panic to effort, from fear to fierce determination. The young mother pushed, tears streaming down her face. And at the same moment, the woman on the mat gasped sharply, her body arching as if struck by an invisible force. A scream tore from her throat. Then silence. Across the village, a baby's cry rose. Strong. Alive. People froze where they stood. The healer rushed back to the woman's hut. Her eyes were open. She was smiling. Tears streamed down her temples, but her expression held nothing but relief. "It's done," she whispered. "What is done?" he asked, voice trembling. She turned her head slightly, as if listening to the distant sound of new life. "The weight has passed," she said. "He can live now." Her pulse fluttered beneath the healer's fingers, weakening fast. "Who are you?" he whispered. She did not answer. Instead, she lifted one trembling hand and placed it over her heart. "Tell her," she said softly. "Tell her she was never alone." Her breath shuddered. The smile remained. And as the sun finally broke over the horizon, bathing the village in gold, the healer realized with horror and awe, the woman had not been refusing medicine to save herself. She had been refusing it to keep death focused on her, so that a child, not yet born, could survive. Disinvolva a Part 8 com 600 palavras Part 8. The full revelation, almost equals 600 words. The village gathered in silence as the truth finally took shape. The healer stood between two huts, one filled with the raw cries of new life, the other wrapped in a stillness so deep it felt sacred. He had spent years learning the language of the body, the balance of herbs and blood and breath. But nothing had prepared him for what he now understood. This was not sickness. This was transfer. He returned to the woman's hut slowly, as if walking too fast might shatter what remained. She was awake, though barely. Her skin was pale, stretched thin over bone, her strength almost gone. Yet her eyes were clear, clearer than they had been in days. "You knew," the healer said quietly. "From the beginning." She nodded. "When?" he asked. Her voice was a whisper shaped by effort. "The first time I felt it move." He frowned. "Move." "The weight," she said. "It comes like a shadow before birth. Not to everyone. Only when a life is marked to be lost." The healer's chest tightened. "You've done this before," he said, not as a question. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. "Yes." Memories rushed through him now. Moments that had never made sense until this instant. The timing of her arrivals. The way she grew ill when other women carried children. The unexplained recoveries. The unexplained deaths that were not hers. "She carries what the body cannot," the woman continued. "The pain. The failing. The breaking. It must go somewhere. And you take it," he said. "I hold it," she corrected gently. "As long as I can." The healer's hands clenched into fists. "You could have died every time." "I almost did," she replied. Outside, the cries of the newborn softened into quiet whimpers. A life settling into the world. "Why you?" the healer asked. "Why are you able to do this?" Her gaze drifted toward the door, toward the sound of that fragile breathing. "Because once," she said, "someone did it for me." His breath caught. "I was born too early," she went on. "My mother should have lost me. Everyone said she would. But another woman, one who never had children of her own, fell sick during my birth. Very sick." Understanding struck him like a blow. "She died," the healer whispered. The woman nodded. "And I lived." Silence filled the hut. "I grew up knowing what she gave," the woman said. "And when I felt the weight for the first time, I recognized it." "So you made a vow," the healer said. "Yes," she replied. "Not to the spirits. Not to the land. To her." Her breathing grew shallow again. The effort of speaking was costing her dearly. "I do not refuse medicine because I hate life," she said softly. "I refuse it because medicine would push the weight back, and it would not return to me. It would go where it was meant to go." "To the child," the healer said. She nodded. "Then why this time?" he asked. "Why was this one different?" Her lips curved faintly. "Because this time, the child was a boy who will carry many lives on his back. He will be needed." The healer felt tears burn his eyes. "You knew he mattered," he said. "I knew he was loved," she replied. That was enough. Outside, the elders listened, stunned, as the healer finally spoke the truth aloud. No one interrupted. No one questioned. The pieces fit too perfectly now. What they had feared was not madness. What they had judged was not stubbornness. What they had watched was not self-destruction. It was inheritance. Sacrifice passed hand to hand, life to life, in silence. The woman shifted weakly on the mat. Her time was nearly gone. "I'm tired," she whispered. The healer reached for the medicine one last time, then stopped. He understood now. Some cures are not meant to be taken. They are meant to be carried. And in that understanding, the village finally saw her not as a woman who refused healing, but as one who became it. The woman died as the village breathed in. Not in pain, not in fear, but in quiet completion. The healer felt her final breath leave her body like a soft release, as if something heavy had finally been set down. Her face relaxed in a way no one had seen before. The lines carved by suffering smoothed. What remained was not the image of death, but of rest. Outside, the village waited. When the healer stepped into the light, every movement stopped. No one asked the question aloud. They already knew the answer. He bowed his head once. A long, shared silence followed. Then, from across the path, a sound rose, small, fragile, undeniable. The cry of the newborn. The two truths existed at once, impossible to separate. Life arriving as life departed. No one spoke. Many wept openly now, not from despair, but from the unbearable clarity of understanding. They buried her at the edge of the village, where the morning sun touched first. No mocker named her. She would not have wanted one. Instead, they placed a single smooth stone, unremarkable to anyone who did not know what it carried. The young mother came when she could walk again, holding her son close. She knelt by the stone, tears falling freely, her voice shaking as she whispered words no one else was meant to hear. "I felt her," she said. "When the pain should have taken him, it left me." The healer listened, heart heavy and full. The boy grew. Strong. Curious. Gentle in a way that surprised people. When he fell, he stood quickly. When others cried, he moved toward them, not away. As he learned to walk the village paths, he often stopped near the stone, resting his small hand against it for reasons he could not explain. No one told him why. Some truths wait. Years passed. The village changed in small ways. When illness came, they still used medicine. They still trusted the healer. But they no longer believed that all healing came from what could be swallowed or applied. They learned to watch more closely, to listen longer, to respect silence. When someone refused help, they no longer rushed to judgment. They asked different questions. They remembered the woman who said nothing and gave everything. And the elders began telling a new story to the children, one that was never written down. It spoke of a woman who carried death so others would not have to. Of a choice made not in anger or fear, but in love so deep it required no explanation. Of how some people are not meant to live long lives, but meaningful ones. The story ended the same way every time. Not all sacrifices are loud, the elders would say. And not all heroes are meant to be saved. On certain mornings, when the sun rose just right and the air held still, people swore they felt something near the stone. Not a presence, but a peace. A sense that something had been balanced, exactly as it was meant to be. And if anyone ever wondered why the woman refused all medicine, why she chose pain over survival, they no longer asked it with confusion. They asked it with reverence. Because they understood now, she did not refuse healing. She became the reason it worked. And that is why her story was never meant to shock. It was meant to be remembered.